We would like to greet Mrs. Jacqueline M. Bosquillos, our research advisor,
the panelists, and to all the audiences. Good day.
I am Giselle G. Graida.
I am Kristen Faye L. Garcia.
And we are the researchers.
Now let's talk about our research. Our research is entitled The Learning Practices, Challenges, and Needs of Pupils with Deafness During the Pandemic.
Now, let me introduce the background of our study. The COVID-19 pandemic has immensely changed the world, which affected almost all aspects of life. We have felt serious social, economic, and health crisis, which has been a challenge for most of us. In mitigating its effect, COVID-19 containment measures like closing public places, including offices, entertainment places, and schools were implemented. Seemingly, education was the most affected sector. From the traditional face-to-face classes, the mode of education was suddenly shifted to distance learning. Students were forced to adapt to a new education system just to ensure the continuity of education. Apparently, every student was affected with this unexpected transition in educational platform, and it is evident as some learning challenges were determined. These some identified learning challenges students experienced during the pandemic were distractions, seeking motivations, technical issues, being left behind, and diminished social aspects according to ANA 2020. As we observe, most of the studies focuses on the learning experiences of regular learners during the pandemic. There are just few studies which have looked upon the challenges and needs of students with deafness during the pandemic and how they overcome it. One of these studies was conducted by Kokan, Osmok, and Varinova 2021 in Siberia. The authors stated in their paper that there is an emergence of complications that affect the cognitive ability of a deaf student to receive, summarize, and deposit information due to the new mode of education, aside from the technical and organizational issues. They also added that there are complications with the emotional aspect of deaf students, and these are some of the reasons for the high dropout rate of students with hearing impairment. Also, in the Philippines, Kaupayan and Pogoy 2021 found that most of the respondents have difficulties and negative experiences with these new learning platforms. There were really just few studies which tried to examine students with deafness in the rapid shift of educational platform, especially in the Philippine setting. Therefore, the researchers' interest and enthusiasm regarding this topic has stimulated. The researchers have seen the need for comprehensive and updated research with regards to the learning practices, challenges, and needs of deaf pupils during the pandemic in order to develop counteractive measures for overcoming the salient challenges and providing the needs of the deaf pupils during the pandemic. Thus, this study aims to determine the effectiveness of the learning practices to address the needs and challenges of pupils with deafness during the pandemic. Specifically, it aims to 1. Identify the learning needs of the students with deafness. 2. Identify the different learning challenges they encountered during the pandemic. 3. Identify the learning practices employed by the students to address these needs and challenges. And 4th, determine the effectiveness of these learning practices in addressing their needs and challenges.
Now let's proceed to the methodologies. For this study, we will use a mixed method research that employed quantitative and qualitative design to address the objectives of our study. The qualitative research design was used to gather information from deaf students who responded that they employed certain learning practices to address their needs and challenges. Meanwhile, quantitative research was used to gather, analyze, and interpret data about the challenges, needs, and effectiveness of the learning practices employed by the deaf pupils during the pandemic. We used total population sampling to identify the participants. 11 participants, particularly pupils with deafness and hard of hearing in Sorsogon East Central School, were identified. 3 of deaf pupils were enrolled in grade 4. 2 of them were in grade 5, and the 6 were in grade 6. Prior to data collection, the researchers formulated a formal letter of inquiry that was approved by our research advisor and intended for submission to the school principal of Sorsogon East Central School. The letter requested permission to conduct a survey and interview with deaf and hard of hearing pupils. Once permission was granted, a sign language interpreter accompanied the researchers during the interview portion of this study. This helped to ensure that effective communication was maintained between the researcher and the participant in order to maximize validity and reliability of results. A structured survey and interviews were conducted in order to obtain both quantitative and qualitative data. It contains standardized questions with fixed scheme to gather enough relevant information. The questionnaire and interview guides were chopped into 4 categories that will address our research question. 1. Identify the learning needs of the students with deafness and hard of hearing. 2. Identify the different learning challenges they encountered during the pandemic. 3. Identify the learning practices employed by the students to address these needs and challenges. And 4. Determine the effectiveness of these learning practices in addressing their needs and challenges. In analyzing the quantitative data collected, frequency and percentage was used as descriptive statistics. These tools are appropriate in addressing the data. Frequency was used to measure the number of times each score occurred in the respective data set. Percentage was also used to make comparison between series of data. P is equals to F over N times 100. In analyzing the qualitative data, thematic analysis was used. The data gathered was examined to identify the common themes that come up repeatedly. In conducting this analysis, we followed the 6-step process developed by Braun and Clark in 2006, including familiarization, coding, generating themes, reviewing themes, defining, naming themes, and writing up.
Let us discuss the results of our study. Upon gathering, analyzing, and interpreting the data, we have found out the learning needs of pupils with deafness of Sorsogon East Central School during the pandemic. Majority of the pupils with deafness, particularly 10 or 90.90% of them, needs access to gadgets and face-to-face interaction with a teacher to practice their sign language. There are also 9 or 81.81% who needs to receive support from the school and need to receive home visits from the teachers. They also need peaceful environment at home when answering module, according to 8 or 72.72% of the participants. Moreover, about 7 or 63.63% of them needs financial and moral support from their parents and need assistive technology like hearing aid. Furthermore, 4 or 36.36% of the deaf pupils responded that they need to receive modules with clear prints.
As shown in Table 2 and Figure 2, it was apparent that the greatest challenge deaf pupils have encountered during the pandemic was adjusting to modular learning. 11 participants, or 100% of the population, experienced difficulty in adjusting from face-to-face setting to modular learning. This implies that the sudden transition of education system has been a challenge for them. This finding is relatively linked to Malice 2021, claimed that deaf and hard of hearing students appear to have an even harder time adjusting to this format. In addition, it was found out by the recent poll conducted by the National Deaf Center on Post-Secondary Outcomes, or NDC, at the University of Texas of Austin that 75% of deaf college students admit that distance learning is much more difficult than traditional learning. For the deaf students, learning in person is more convenient and effective for them. On the other hand, two participants or 18% of the population responded that it was challenging for them to answer all the learning modules as the time allotted was not enough for them. This was the least learning challenge that the deaf pupils experienced during the pandemic. This means that some are having difficulty in managing their time in dealing with the learning modules.
Now, let us talk about the learning practices employed by pupils with deafness to address their needs and challenges. When collecting, transcribing, and coding the data using the Braun and Clark's 2006 thematic analysis, four themes have emerged. These include 1. Lack of access to technology. 2. Self-learning management. 3. Communication. And 4th, insufficient support. In addressing their needs and challenges with regards to lack of access to technology, deaf pupils have employed various learning practices. These include the following responses. I borrow cell phone from my mother. I borrow cell phone from my cousin. I borrow cell phone from my sister. I go to the barangay hall to access computer. I connect to the Wi-Fi of barangay hall. I buy load for data. And I use free data to communicate. In addition, with regards to managing their self-learning, they also exercise different practices in order to overcome their needs and difficulties with learning independently. Their responses are as follows. I ignore distractions at home. I try to focus on answering learning modules. I go to a quiet place. I go to a place that has a strong signal. I try to finish my module on time. I am managing the time. I try to focus in answering my modules. I try to prioritize. I ask the teacher about it or the errors in printed modules. I adjust in time. I think of beautiful things. I play after answering the learning modules. I inform my teacher when it is difficult to answer the modules. And I tell my teacher if there are unclear images. Moreover, pupils with deafness also shared how they address challenges and needs in communicating with their teachers and classmates during the pandemic. They expressed, I text my teacher when I have a question. I video call my teacher using my mother or mother's cell phone. I text or call my classmates. I text my teacher if there is a problem. And I wait for my teacher to conduct home visits. Furthermore, in addressing the insufficiency of support from significant others, the pupils with deafness revealed that the following learning practices help them overcome it. I work in the rice field to earn money for load. My mother supported me. I go to my grandmother for money. I ask my sister for help. I ask my sibling to help me answer. I ask my friend to help me finish my module.
Now let's move on to Table 3. Table 3 reflects the frequency and percentage distribution of participants who responded to their perceptions on the effectiveness of the learning practices they employ in dealing with their learning needs. Of all the identified learning needs of students who are deaf and hard of hearing, all of them has a need for reliable access to the internet. In order to address this common need, the respondents employed various learning practices. These are buying load and going to a place with better internet connection. Majority of the respondents buys a load for them to have access to internet. According to the perception of those students who employ this learning practice, it is 100% very effective to address their need. Another common need that the respondents have is the access to gadgets. All those who are in need of access to gadgets address their need by borrowing from their relatives. But only 50% of them said that it is very effective, while the other 50% says that it is sometimes not effective. Now let's discuss Table 4. Table 4 presents the frequency and percentage distribution of participants who responded regarding their perceptions on the effectiveness of the learning practices they employed in dealing with their learning challenges. 9 among all the participants experienced difficulty in concentrating on answering their learning modules. To address the difficulty of concentrating on answering learning modules at home, 4 or 100% of these 9 participants revealed that they ignored the distractions. All these 4 participants expressed that this learning practice is sometimes not effective. This means that learning at home is not conducive for their learning. Other 2 of the 9 participants deeply focused on answering learning modules to avoid distractions at home. 1 or 50% of these 2 believes that this learning practice is effective, while the other 1 says that it's sometimes not effective. 3 other participants go to a quiet place. 1 says that it is an effective learning practice, and the other 2 says that it is sometimes not effective. 8 among the overall participants lack tools and gadgets that will help them in answering their learning module. To address this difficulty, 7 of them borrow gadgets from their relatives. 2 or 28.57% from these 7 respondents says it is an effective practice. The other 4 or 57.14% says that this practice is sometimes not effective. And the other 1 or 14.28% says it is not effective. 9 among all the respondents find it hard to communicate with their teachers during distance learning. 4 among these respondents go to a place with a strong internet connection so that they can easily contact their teacher. 1 or 25% of these 4 rate this practice as effective, while the other 3 or 75% says it is sometimes not effective. The other 5 ask for their relatives to stand on behalf of the student. All of them, or 100%, says that it is an effective practice. 5 from the 11 respondents find it hard to communicate with classmates. 3 among these 5 use group chats and video calls online. But all of them, 100%, says that it is sometimes not effective. The other 2 divert their minds on focusing on other things, but both of the 2 or 100% says that this practice is sometimes not effective. 8 of all the participants find it difficult to get the learning module at school due to financial problems. To address this issue, all parents and students ask for another schedule to get the modules. 3 or 37.5% among the 8 says that it is very effective, while the other 5 or 62.5% says it is effective. 2 among the overall respondents do not have enough time in answering all the learning modules. Both of these participants make every effort to complete their module on time. Both of them, or 100%, says that it is an effective learning practice, while 9 of the 11 participants have difficulty understanding the lesson on their own. To address this difficulty, 8 of the 9 respondents ask for help from their relatives in understanding the lessons. 3 or 37.5% of them says that this learning practice is effective, while 5 or 62.5% says it is effective. The other 1 tries to focus on understanding his lesson alone. According to him, it is 100% sometimes not effective. 6 of the total respondents believe that the workload in each module is overwhelming or too much to handle. To solve this challenge, 4 among the participants only answer those activities that they fully understand. 2 or 50% of them says it is effective, while the other 2 or 50% says that it is sometimes not effective learning practice. The other learning practice to address this difficulty is asking help from their parents. 2 from the 6 respondents utilize this learning practice. Both of these 2 or 100% says that it is sometimes not effective. Balancing family, household chores, and school obligations is something that 9 among all the respondents find difficult. To deal with this difficulty, one learning practice employed by 2 of the participants is managing their time.
Prioritizing things is also one learning practice employed by the other 2 from the respondents. 50% of the 2 says that it is effective, and the other 50% says it is sometimes not effective. The other 5 only try to focus on answering their modules. But all of these 5, 100% say that deep focus as a learning practice is sometimes not effective. Another issue that participants are experiencing is errors and mistakes on the printed learning modules or text portions in sizes that are not large enough to be easily distinguished. Only one learning practice that is being employed by the student participants. This is informing the teacher or asking the teacher about it. 1 or 14.28% of these 7 respondents say that it is very effective. 4 or 57.1% say it is effective, and the other 2, 28.5%, say that it is sometimes not effective. All of the respondents experienced difficulty transitioning from face-to-face to modular instruction. They employed 2 different learning practices. 8 of them learned to adjust in time and adapt to the new mode of instruction. 5 or 62.5% among the participants who employed this learning practice said that it is effective, while the other 3, 37.5%, said that it is sometimes not effective. The other learning practice that is being employed by the 3 participants is asking for help from the teachers and parents to guide them during the transition period. 2 or 66.6% of them find it effective, while the other 1 or 33.3% says it is sometimes not effective. Sometimes getting emotionally effective while answering the module is another challenge that is being experienced by 9 participants. Playing after answering is one practice that 5 among the participants employed to address this challenge. All these 5 participants say that it is 100% effective. Another way to address the difficulty is thinking of beautiful things to divert their emotion. It is being employed by 2 of the participants, but they both or 100% say that it is sometimes not effective. Video call with classmates and teachers is one practice that 2 among the 9 participants employed. 1 or 50% says that it is effective, but the other 1 or 50% says it is sometimes not effective.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, deaf students of Sorsogon East Central School have encountered various learning challenges and needs which adds up to their struggles. Deaf pupils face learning needs and challenges in the following areas. 1. Gadgets or access to technology are not easily accessible to the deaf pupils. Most of them do not have their own gadgets which they can access, like cell phones, laptop, and internet. 2. Communication or interaction between deaf pupil and teacher is ineffective, which impacts the practice of sign language of the deaf pupils. 3. Deaf pupils find that learning is extremely challenging to the sudden shift to modular learning during the pandemic. 4. Students who are deaf or hard of hearing had difficulty managing their time due to distractions at home. The learning needs and challenges that deaf pupils face during this period are a matter of great historical interest to the deaf community. Nevertheless, all the learning needs and challenges they encountered during distance learning were addressed by various learning practices and strategies employed by them. Despite their health conditions, they have managed to overcome these learning barriers because of their will and determination to learn and thrive.
The researchers made the following recommendations to support and help the deaf pupils of Sorsogon East Central School overcome challenges and needs during the pandemic. 1. The school and the local government unit or the LGU should collaborate to propose a project to provide the deaf pupils of Sorsogon East Central School with gadgets, specifically cell phone, tablet, or laptop, to help them with schooling during the distance learning setup. They may also include in the proposal the provision of financial assistance intended for load purchase.
2. The barangay officials should ensure that the internet connection in the barangay hall is always accessible and stable.
3. Parents should provide a space or study corner for their child so that they would have a quiet place where they can concentrate learning.
4. The school nurse or health professional in school should check on the students' physical and mental health to ensure their wellness during this time of pandemic.
And number 5, teachers of the deaf pupils should give more time home visiting for them to practice their sign language each time and check on the learning concerns of the students.
That is the end of our discussion.
Thank you for listening.